Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Jabihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Chari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Bhadravadikacharya Ashtottara Sri Srimad His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Bhadravadikacharya Ashtottara Sri Srimad His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Now I'm just going to take a chance. Mahima, you there? No. Okay. I forgot I pulled this out without looking at where it was. Do you know where the verse is? Let's see. Chapter 4. 27? Could be. Indriyagni Sujuvati, that sounds. Yeah, some the unadulterated brahmachari sacrifice the hearing process. We read that. Yeah, 27 is right. I think you got it. Right? 214. The page number. You're talking about the page number? Yeah. No. Not 253. We're on text 27 of chapter 4. 427? Okay. You're on the right page. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. On this 11th day of June 2025 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 4, Transcendental Knowledge, text 27, the top of page 214. Sarvanindriya karmani prana karmani chapare atma samyama yogagnau dhuvati jnana dipite sarvanindriya karmani prana karmani chapare atma samyama yogagnau dhuvati jnana dipite sarvanindriya karmani prana karmani chapare atma samyama yogagnau dhuvati jnana dipite. Go ahead. Sarvanindriya karmani prana karmani chapare atma samyama yogagnau dhuvati jnana dipite. What's right? Sarvanindriya karmani prana karmani chapare atma samyama yogagnau dhuvati jnana dipite. Sarvanindriya karmani prana karmani chapare atma samyama yogagnau dhuvati jnana dipite. Anyone online? Chad, you there? Oh, still on vacation.
Sarvanindriya karmani
Indriya karmani
prana karmani chapare
prana karmani chapare
atma samyama yogagnau
atma samyama yogagnau
dhuvati jnana dipite.
dhuvati jnana dipite. Okay, what are my words? Sarvani, of all indriya, the senses, karmani, functions, prana karmani, functions of the life breath, cha, also, apare, others, atma samyama, atma samyama, of controlling the mind, yoga, the linking process, agnau, in the fire of, dhuvati, offer, jnana dipite, because of the urge for self-realization. Translation. Others who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of the mind and senses offer the functions of all the senses and of the life breath as the oblation into the fire of the controlled mind. Purport. The yoga system conceived by Patanjali is referred to herein. In the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, the soul is called Pratyagatma and Paragatma. As long as the soul is attached to sense enjoyment, it is called Paragatma. But as soon as the same soul becomes detached from sense enjoyment, it is called Pratyagatma. The soul is subjected to the functions of 10 kinds of air at work within the body, and this is perceived through the breathing system. The Patanjali system of yoga instructs one on how to control the functions of the body's air in a technical manner, so that ultimately all the functions of the air within become favorable for purifying the soul of material attachment. According to this yoga system, Pratyagatma is the ultimate goal. This Pratyagatma is withdrawn from activities in matter. The senses interact with the sense objects, like the ear for hearing, eye for seeing, nose for smelling, tongue for tasting, and hand for touching. And all of them are thus engaged in activities outside the self. They are called the functions of the prana vayu. The apana vayu goes downwards, vyana vayu acts to shrink and expand, samana vayu adjusts equilibrium, Udana Vayu goes upwards. And when one is enlightened, one engages all these in searching for self-realization. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakya Chakshur Unmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance to him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, what do we get out of this? I think this is another one of these verses describing systems of yoga that we probably won't be practicing, because it seems it's Patanjali Yoga, and that comes up in the 6th chapter, and even after the whole explanation that Krishna gives, Arjuna says, oh, I don't think I can do it. And if Arjuna can't do it, who are we? So these are presented ultimately, and especially in this age, Kali Yuga, to be rejected, because it's not necessary. It's not necessary. The whole point is purification here, right? Somehow the soul to become detached from the sense gratification and everything. So that can be done by, let's go out in the desert, sit there for a while, away from all of this, and we'll be breathing and concentrating and breathing and concentrating. But will we really make progress? No. It's not going to work for us, us Kali Yugites. It may have been possible for some in previous ages to make progress in this way. But the whole point of the bhakti as taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is a practical system how the Kali Yugites, who are disqualified in many ways, can actually make advancement. Well, what's the advancement? It's the Atma. It's all Atma here, right? Atma Sangama Yoga now. And we're trying to detach the Atma from eons of lifetimes of it being attached to this material world, and thus being imprisoned, thus being shackled. We forgot all. It makes you forget Krishna. Sense gratification makes you forget Krishna. Because if you're remembering Krishna as a super soul, and you know that this is not going to bring you closer to him, and you want that, then you feel very reluctant to engage in sense gratification. But if you have no idea of that, then that's all you know is sense gratification. And that's generally what you find in the Kali Yuga, unless you search out the devotees. So this kind of technical process, worrying about the airs, and the airs circulating, all these different things, is fascinating. But ultimately, it's not something that we want to really try to practice, because it'll definitely bog you down, rather than chanting and dancing. I remember in the 4th canto, which is one of the first cantos I proofread, I remember something there. And was it King Pṛthā? Who was out, classically, he left the kingdom and he went to practice austerities in the forest. That's what they all do. And it describes how he was doing this pranayama and all these things, And Prabhupada said, when you practice Harinam Sankirtan, you automatically, the breathing is automatically, dovetailed with the Supreme, and you're getting the same benefit. And it's so much easier and so much more enjoyable. So this is interesting, how the different airs, different kinds of airs, and we should know that if we find it helpful. But I don't think that we're meant to get hung up on this too much. So let's go on. Dravya gyastapoya gya yoga yagyastatapare svajaya jnana yagyascha yatayak samshitavataha. Having accepted strict vows, some become enlightened by sacrificing their possessions, and others by performing severe austerities, by practicing the yoga of eightfold mysticism, or by studying the Vedas to advance in transcendental knowledge. So this is all sacrifice. You notice yagya appears many times in the verse. Purport. These sacrifices may be fitted into various divisions. There are persons who are sacrificing their possessions in the form of various kinds of charities. And in India, the rich mercantile community, or princely orders, open various kinds of charitable institutions like Dharmashala, Annachetra, Atitishala, Anathalaya, and Vidyapit. In other countries, too, there are many hospitals, old age homes, and similar charitable foundations meant for distributing food, education, and medical treatment free to the poor. All these charitable activities are called Dravyamaya Yajna. There are others who, for higher elevation in life or for promotion to higher planets within the universe, voluntarily accept many kinds of austerities, such as Chandrayana and Chaturmasya. These processes entail severe vows for conducting life under certain rigid rules. For example, under the Chaturmasya vow, the candidate does not shave for 4 months during the year, July to October. He does not eat certain foods, does not eat twice in a day, and does not leave home. Such sacrifice of the comforts of life is called Tapomaya Yajna. There are still others who engage themselves in different kinds of mystic yogas, like the Patanjali system, for merging into the existence of the Absolute, or Hatha Yoga, or Ashtanga Yoga, for particular perfections. And some travel to all the sanctified places of pilgrimage. All these practices are called Yoga Yajna, sacrifice for a certain type of perfection in the material world. There are others who engage themselves in the studies of different Vedic literatures, specifically the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutras, or the Sankhya philosophy. All of these are called Svadhyaya Yajna, or engagement in the sacrifice of studies. All these yogis are faithfully engaged in different types of sacrifice and are seeking a higher status of life. Krishna consciousness, however, is different from these because it is the direct service of the Supreme Lord. Krishna consciousness cannot be attained by any one of the above-mentioned types of sacrifice, but can be attained only by the mercy of the Lord and his bona fide devotees. Therefore, Krishna consciousness is transcendental. So Prabhupada's kind of revealing I don't want to say the punchline, but the conclusion of all this. Krishna is presenting these because this is, after all, an Upanishad, Gita Upanishad. So he's referring to some of the wisdom and the knowledge available in the Upanishads. But ultimately, it's like, Sarva Dharma Parityajya Mame Kam Sharanam. Just give up all these different dharmas and surrender to me. Okay, we'll go on. Apane juvati pranam, prane panam tatapare, prana panagati rudva, pranayama parayanaha, apare niyatahara, pranan praneshu juvati. Still others, who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance, practice by offering the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming, and the incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Whoa. Others, curtailing the eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as a sacrifice. Purport: this system of yoga for controlling the breathing process is called pranayama. And in the beginning, it is practiced in the Hatha Yoga system through different sitting postures. All of these processes are recommended for controlling the senses and for advancement in spiritual realization. This practice involves controlling the airs within the body so as to reverse the directions of their passage. The apana air goes downward, and the prana air goes up. The pranayama yogi practices breathing the opposite way until the currents are neutralized into puraka, equilibrium. Offering the exhaled breath into the inhaled breath is called rechaka. When both air currents are completely stopped, one is said to be in kumbhaka yoga. By practice of kumbhaka yoga, one can increase the duration of life for perfection and spiritual realization. The intelligent yogi is interested in attaining perfection in one life without waiting for the next. For by practicing kumbhaka yoga, the yogis increase the duration of life by many, many years. A Krishna-conscious person, however, being always situated in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, automatically becomes the controller of the senses. His senses, being always engaged in the service of Krishna, have no chance of becoming otherwise engaged. So at the end of life, he is naturally transferred to the transcendental plane of Lord Krishna. Consequently, he makes no attempt to increase his longevity. He is at once raised to the platform of liberation, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Mam chayova bicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati chaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in unalloyed devotional service unto the Lord transcends the modes of material nature and is immediately elevated to the spiritual platform. Close quote. A Krishna-conscious person begins from the transcendental stage, and he is constantly in that consciousness. Therefore, there is no falling down, and ultimately he enters into the abode of the Lord without delay. The practice of reduced eating is automatically done when one eats only Krishna prasadam, or food which is offered first to the Lord. Reducing the eating process is very helpful in the matter of sense control. And without sense control, there is no possibility of getting out of the material entanglement. So this is a classic. You know, you're getting into the ins and outs of the Rechika and the Pūraka and the Pranayama, and then the end Prabhupada quotes a verse said, but a Krishna conscious person begins from the transcendental stage. So this is the nature of Krishna consciousness, is that when you see it in context with other forms of yoga, you can see that the essence of these other forms of yoga is practice in Krishna consciousness, like karma yoga. Karma yoga is, giving the result of your fruits of your activity, not being attached to the fruits of your activity. But if you give them to Krishna, then it becomes integrated in bhakti yoga. Then that's part of bhakti yoga. In other words, we give as much as we can, that we have, without Ishavassamidam sarvam, that everything belongs to Krishna. That's axiomatic. And we are entitled to what we need for maintenance, but not more. When you send more and more, then you're artificially attached, and you're anchoring yourself to the material world. That's the thing. So karma yoga, the ultimate karma yoga is Krishna consciousness, is that you're working for Krishna. Buddhi yoga, okay, buddhi yoga, we're thinking, speculating, figuring it all out. That's fine, But if your intelligence is engaged in figuring out ways to perform your service better for Krishna, that's the best buddhi yoga. So we're coming to like 34, which is a key verse that's coming up. Mics are here. Can you grab one? And just okay.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
So I just have a curiosity. Here in San Diego, we have the Self-Realization Fellowship and Yogananda. I mean, it seems like, I know some of the devotees, they seem pretty advanced, but what's your personal opinion on that type of path, like Kriya Yoga? And I'm sure you're familiar with Yogananda.
Well, there's really, for us, there's really only one criteria. If it's helping you to get closer to Krishna and give up material entanglement and so forth, then it's good. But it can be a diversion. I mean, I was involved in yoga for quite a while before I started chanting Hare Krishna in Bhakti. And I was benefiting from it, but the benefit was basically in my health, and also my mental state was becoming much more calm and like that. So it's definitely beneficial. But I didn't even have a motive. In other words, I wasn't part of course, that's yoga as taught in Western countries. But to go off into this, like for instance, a perfect example is Radhanath Swami. He actually did it. He left America and went to India. Somehow he got into India, even though he didn't have a passport or something to go to India. And he practiced serious yoga. He was meditating and austere and everything. But ultimately, he came down to Bombay. He went to the Bombay Pandal, and miraculously, this is one of these things that Prabhupada picked him out of the crowd. He saw him. Somehow he could tell that he was eligible to really become a serious devotee, and he invited him to come up on the stage with him from the crowd. And so then he became full-on bhakta. So it's just that these other yogas, there tend to be like a perfect example. Because I don't have much experience with it, but Amala Bhakta Swami, he's kind of, I don't know how famous he is anymore in the ISKCON world at large, but he made many recordings that are very popular of Krishna Lila, Prabhupada's books. And he was my first yoga teacher. And he was a serious yogi. He had already he was so much recognized that they were waiting for him to take over a whole building and temple in Rishikesh. That was his next assignment. You know, he was in New York now. But he became disillusioned with his guru, who was a very experienced, guru. He was expert in Hatha Yoga. There was a book that he put out when he was a young man with photographs. I used that, how to stand on your head and everything like that. But he saw that because at that time we had a big building in Manhattan, a famous building we had for a few years, from 75 to 80, 5 years. I think we had that building. And I lived there for a year and a half in 79 and 80. And that was, incredible. It's right there in Manhattan on the west side. And 11, 12 stories. Prabhupada had his quarters there. He would come and visit. And Amala Bhakta became kind of curious about it. I don't know how he first heard about it, and he went to visit, and he heard a lecture by Vidyananda Maharaj. And he saw the great contrast between his own guru, who would come to visit, come to New York twice a year or something, and insist that he be given a penthouse to live in, which is usually expensive. And then he would see people, and we'd line up. I remember lining up. I was outside getting ready to go get my little darshan. I think I don't know if I had to pay anything for the darshan, but if you pay maybe $30, you can get initiated, So this is, and there was no, I never heard from Amala Bhakta, no, you can't do this, don't do this, do this. It was all come, bend this way, do this way, and everything. So Amala Bhakta became disillusioned. And he saw that this fellow would, like so many others, they were just trying to become wealthy, from the practice, from selling it. So he escaped from that, and he went to the temple on the west side. Then he came to L.A., where his mother lived, and eventually he ended up in the L.A. temple. I don't know if I told that. This is kind of funny because I knew him. This was already 75, and I had met him in 71, 72, and then I lost touch with him. And then suddenly he shows up in the Prasadam hall in the L.A. temple, Watseka Avenue. And I told Danavir Prabhu, who was in charge of he wasn't a sannyasi yet, he was in charge of the bhaktas. He was a pioneer in training in bhaktas. So he was there, and I told him, watch out for this guy. I know him from New York. He's here. He's going to try to steal some of our bhaktas. That's what I thought. Why else would he be there? But he had already gone through this whole thing, change, and he came there, and he wanted to become a bhakta, and he did. He became Amala Bhakta. So he came across. I was studying I was working in BTG, and so I was one of the editors. So he came and sat down with me, and he wanted to tell the whole story, but he didn't want to write it out. So he just told me the story, and I took a lot of notes, and I wrote the story up for him. So that it was published, which I can let you know. And it's so illustrative of how, because this fellow, his guru wasn't alone. There were so many who just came to cash in on the mood. They weren't trying to give their students the ultimate truth by which they could go back to Godhead. They were training them to run the business while they were in India and in the So that's the danger of these other yogas, is that they don't directly, if they don't directly connect you with Krishna consciously, then they can simply be diversions. They can become another form of attachment. And so the best thing is to follow the Bhakti Yoga principles. And there's one verse by Prabodhananda Saraswati in the Chaitanya Chandramrita, I believe. Prabhupada quote this verse: Kaivalyam nadakayate tidashapura akasha pushpayate durdantendu yakara sarva patali prodkata dangstrayate vishwang purna sukhayate vidimahindradish takitayate yat karunya kataksa vaiva vapatam tam gordame vastama. So the last line is like, you have to know the basis of it to make the sense of the rest of the verse. For one who is empowered by the merciful sidelong glance of Lord Chaitanya, by being a serious devotee and doing what we do, then here's the result. Kaivalyam narakayate. Kaivalyam is merging into the Brahman. That's one form of self-realization. But it's ultimately temporary because when it's not in your natural position, and you're simply in pure consciousness. Like we have Prabhupada's pranam mantra. I'm sure you all know it. Nirvishesha shunyavadi pachadadeshatarine. So what does that mean? Nirvishesha means no details. That's the Brahman. That's the idea that we want simply mukti, and we want to give up all sense, activity, all thoughts, everything, and just merge our consciousness into Brahman, and we'll be free from birth and death. That's the Mayavadi ideal. So that's nirvishesha. Shunyavadi is like what the Buddhists teach, that the ultimate reality is void. That will attain satori or nirvana by basically destroying. Huh? There's a slight difference, but ultimately it's very similar. The Mayavadis think something exists, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mityam, right? But the voidists ultimately think that in the absolute reality is that there's nothing, that you're nothing. You'll be happy if you destroy your identity and you simply become void. No.
So Mayavadi
the Buddhists say that.
Mayavadi thinks there is a light.
Yeah, the Brahman. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mitya.
Yeah.
Brahma Satyam Jagan. They say this world is mitya, it's false, But we say, how could it be false? It's produced by the truth, right? By Brahman, the Supreme Brahman. That's Krishna. So how can this be false? It's temporary, but it's not false. You see, that's a big difference. So there is a slight difference, but they're very closely aligned. But that's why nirvishesha shunyavadi. Nirvishesha literally means no details. Everything's merged into the homogeneous white light. And that is the first stage of self-realization. Vadanti tat tattvadas tattam yajnanamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabhyate. How do we know this? This is spoken by those who know the truth. Vadanti tat, what is that absolute? That we should try to find out. A tato brahma jigyasa, right? That's in the Vedanta Sutra. But the Vedanta Sutra is ultimately a personalist work. The Mayavadis misinterpreted in an impersonalist way. And Lord Chaitanya was fighting that. He had that meeting with Prakashananda Saraswati where he converted them all. He explained the Vedanta Sutra in terms of the Bhagavatam. But Bhagavatam is the ultimate commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. And that's why Lord Chaitanya, nor his followers for a long time, wrote another commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. We have the Bhagavatam. That's it. But all the other lines had their own personal ones. So Baladev Vidyabhushan, who's the commentator of this book, he eventually wrote one called the Govinda Bhashya. Does anyone remember why it's the Govinda Bhashya? Well,
Krishna came and told him.
Well, first he was praying to Govinda, and the garland came down, authorizing him. And he felt as he was writing it that Govinda was actually writing it, and he was just kind of, it's the scribe, So he called it the Govinda Bhashya. So the point is that Mayavad is very dangerous, and that's why all our great acharyas, including Lord Chaitanya, had to fight with the Mayavadis, to convert. And so, but here Prakashananda is describing different kinds of things that those who got the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, they understand things that other members who are conversing with the Vedic culture may get off into. Like there's a whole thing, the karma kanda. How do you worship this God in this way and to go to this heaven? That's still materialistic. But it's better than just being stuck on earth. But you come down, you don't really make any. So he goes through a list. The first thing is kaivalyam narakayate. This ultimate nirvana, or whatever you call it, the merging into the Brahman, called kaivalya, means oneness. Narakayate. That's hellish for the devotee to lose his individuality. There's no bhakti. Without Bhagavan and the bhakta and the process of bhakti, there's no such thing as bhakti. If you're just merging into Brahman, it's like the demons, they get to merge into Krishna's body. We don't want to do that. You don't want to merge into Krishna. We want to be close to Krishna and serve Krishna and engage in interaction. So that's the first thing. Tridashapur akasha pushpayate. Tridashapur, that's referring to all the 33 or 33 million heavens and upper planets. Each of the demigods has their own place. That are we interested in that? No, that's just like an akasha pushpa. That's like a sky flower. There isn't such a thing. Forget that. We're not attracted to that. Then there's what the yogis, what they practice. A lot of sense control practice. So that's. So here's Durdantendriya Kala Sarpa. So these senses can be like poisonous snakes, and they're difficult to control. But they're not dangerous if Dangstrayate. Durdantendriya Kala Patali Prodkata Dangstrayate. If their fangs are removed, then they still maybe look dangerous, but they're not. So what does that mean in terms of the bhakta? The bhakta has the same senses, they're still engaging them, but because they're engaged in Krishna's service, they don't hurt you. They help you. They help you serve Krishna. It's when the senses are demanding sense gratification that they can take you to hell. But if you're trained, or by your training, you're trained to use your senses in Krishna's service. Like we're eating, we're smelling, we're tasting, we're doing all these things, but all is in relation to Krishna. So they help us. So rather than hurt us. Then he says, Vishrang Purna Sukhayate. The whole universe becomes filled with happiness. Why? Because you're not trying to exploit it. You're simply seeing everything in relation to Krishna, and when possible, using the things in this world in relation to Krishna and soothing your body. So you're in a very transcendental state of devotion to Krishna, you see. So then at last he says, Vishrang Purna, Vidi Mahendra Adis Chakitayate. So Vidi is Brahma, Mahendra is Indra, and all the other demigods. You see them as insignificant. You don't disrespect them. We offer them respect as devotees, but you don't worship them. And therefore, as far as your sadhana is concerned, they're as insignificant as insects. That's what it says here, that you're not interested in the demigod so much. But, and then the last line tells you, how do you get to this position? By getting the merciful sidelong glance of Lord Chaitanya, by engaging fully in his process, and also trying to spread Krishna consciousness. So it just negates all this other business. We're not interested in merging. We're not interested in siddhis and prolonging our life 10,000 years. No. Use the life, stay healthy and so forth, and leave this body and go back to Godhead. That's the perfection. That's the idea. All right. Where are you? Text 30? I think we're in text 30. 30, right? Sarve pyete yagyavido yagya chapata kalmashaha Yagishishtamatapujo Yanti Brahma Sanatanam. Okay, now he's kind of summarizing. All these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reactions, and having tasted the nectar of the results of sacrifices, they advance toward the supreme eternal atmosphere. Purport. From the foregoing explanation of different types of sacrifice, namely sacrifice of one's possessions, study of the Vedas or philosophical doctrines, and performance of the yoga system, it is found that the common aim of all is to control the senses. Sense gratification is the root cause of material existence. Therefore, unless and until one is situated on a platform apart from sense gratification, there is no chance of being elevated to the eternal platform of full knowledge, full bliss, and full life. This platform is in the eternal atmosphere, or the Brahman atmosphere. All the above-mentioned sacrifices help one to become cleansed of the sinful reactions of material existence. By this advancement in life, not only does one become happy and opulent in this life, but also at the end he enters into the eternal kingdom of God, either merging into the impersonal Brahman or associating with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Okay, so let's go on. This next verse is shorter than usual. Nayam lokosya yagyasya kutonya kurusattama. O best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice, one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. What then of the next? Purport. Whatever form of material existence one is in, one is invariably ignorant of his real situation. In other words, existence in the material world is due to the multiple reactions to our sinful lives. Ignorance is the cause of sinful life, and sinful life is the cause of one's dragging on in material existence. The human form of life is the only loophole by which one may get out of this entanglement. The Vedas therefore give us a chance for escape by pointing out the paths of religion, economic comfort, regulated sense gratification, and at last the means to get out of the miserable condition entirely. The path of religion, or the different kinds of sacrifice recommended above, automatically solves our economic problems. By performance of yajna, we have enough food, enough milk, etc., even if there is a so-called increase of population. When the body is fully supplied, naturally the next stage is to satisfy the senses. The Vedas prescribe, therefore, sacred marriage for required sense gratification. Thereby one is gradually elevated to the platform of release from material bondage, and the highest perfection of liberated life is to associate with the Supreme Lord. Perfection is achieved by performance of yajna, sacrifice, as described above. Now, if a person is not inclined to perform yajna according to the Vedas, how can he expect a happy life, even in this body? What to speak of another body on another planet? There are different grades of material comforts in different heavenly planets, and in all cases there is immense happiness for persons engaged in different kinds of yajna. But the highest kind of happiness that a man can achieve is to be promoted to the spiritual planets by practice of Krishna consciousness. A life of Krishna consciousness is therefore the solution to all the problems of material existence. Okay, let's go on. Evam bohovida yajna vidata brahmano mukhe karmajan viditan sarvan evam gyatva vimokshase. All these different types of sacrifice are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. Knowing them as such, you will become liberated. Purport. Different types of sacrifice, as discussed above, are mentioned in the Vedas to suit the different types of worker. Because men are so deeply absorbed in the bodily concept, these sacrifices are so arranged that one can work either with the body, with the mind, or with the intelligence. But all of them are recommended for ultimately bringing about liberation from the body. This is confirmed by the Lord herewith from his own mouth. Shreyan dravyamaya yagyaj jnana yagya parantapa sarvam karmakilam partha jnane parisamapyate. O chastiser of the enemy, the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, O son of Pṛthā, all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. Purport. The purpose of all sacrifices is to arrive at the status of complete knowledge, then to gain release from material miseries, and ultimately to engage in loving transcendental service to the Supreme Lord, Krishna consciousness. Nonetheless, there is a mystery about all these different activities of sacrifice, and one should know this mystery. Sacrifices sometimes take different forms according to the particular faith of the performer. When one's faith reaches the stage of transcendental knowledge, the performer of sacrifices should be considered more advanced than those who simply sacrifice material possessions without such knowledge. For without attaining the attainment of knowledge, sacrifices remain on the material platform and bestow no spiritual benefit. Real knowledge culminates in Krishna consciousness, the highest stage of transcendental knowledge. Without the elevation of knowledge, sacrifices are simply material activities. When, however, they are elevated to the level of transcendental knowledge, all such activities enter onto the spiritual platform. Depending on differences in consciousness, sacrificial activities are sometimes called karma kanda, fruit of activities, and sometimes jnana kanda, knowledge in the pursuit of truth. It is better when the end is knowledge. So, this chapter is called Transcendental Knowledge. Without developing the transcendental knowledge, you run the risk of getting deviated from the proper course. I mean, it's possible to just chant Hare Krishna and not, know anything about the goal, but it's very difficult to really make advancement because without strengthening the intelligence through knowledge, by association, by hearing the shastras and hearing from the sadhus and the gurus, then one is easy prey for Maya. Let us say that way, easy prey for Maya, because what is it that that keeps us going day after day? You wake up in the morning and you're relying on the knowledge, of who you are, where you work, right? Where your car keys are. I mean, all these things are important for you to just go day to day. And that knowledge, especially when we're understanding transcendental knowledge, I'm a spirit soul, I'm an eternal servant of Krishna. So anything that is deviating me from activity in that identity is helping to keep the covering of Maya over my consciousness, so that I really can't be Krishna conscious. I can't attain the goal of life. So we're given this process of devotional service, which actually, if you follow it, every part of your day can be, Krishna conscious. Even if you're working in a regular job, you can do it in such a way that it doesn't completely deviate your mind. You can apply Krishna consciousness there, and you can understand, the food I'm going to be using as far as possible for Krishna service and whatever. So, but of course, best, if you're fortunate enough to be able to immerse fully, then that's another level. But the whole idea is that we want to keep ourselves focused on the goal and apply what we've learned from authorities and how to navigate our lives in such a way that we're making as much progress as possible toward the final goal of Krishna consciousness. And that's why this next verse is perhaps one of the most famous verses in this chapter. The necessary for getting the association of a tattvadarshi. Tattvadarshi is someone who has seen Krishna or is seeing Krishna at every moment, and being able to come under the guidance. And that's really what we do when we read Prabhupada's books, because he's certainly a tattvadarshi. He's seeing Krishna, and Krishna is seeing him at every moment. And we get real guidance. Otherwise, Bhagavad Gita, you can read the Bhagavad Gita and not really come to the conclusion of it. There's so many Bhagavad Gitas out there. You go on Amazon, there's at least 50 Bhagavad Gitas being sold, But how many are really coming to conclusion and understanding that those two verses in chapter 18 summarize the whole message of Bhagavad Gita? And it's an impetus, it's a challenge for you to do that. In other words, you really want to succeed in this lifetime? Then manmana bhava madbhakto. And Krishna said, think of me, become devoted, worship me, and bow down low. You'll come to me, O friend, I promise you this boon I shall bestow. So Krishna, he's our friend also. He's our best friend, right? Surido sarva bhutanam gyatva mam shantam richati, the end of the 5th chapter. So this bhakti yoga ultimately surpasses and transcends all the other forms of yoga, sacrifice, everything. Their sacrifice is important, but the best sacrifice and the only practical one is Sankirtan Yajna, and it's complete. It's the best. You have a question? I've deduced that.
Excellent deduction. So if I understand this passage correctly, what's being said is that...
Now, is this the purport to 33?
Yeah, the purport that we just read, 33.
Yeah,
So if I understood, the same exact sacrifice by two different people, one with ignorance of Krishna consciousness and the other with awareness of Krishna consciousness, has totally different effects, even though the actual act may be the same. The sacrifice may be the same. Did I understand correctly?
Perhaps. The thing is that if a similar sacrifice is being done in Krishna consciousness, then I think it'll have some different qualities to it. But it may look the same. It may seem the same. For instance, Ekadashi. Ekadashi is actually a devotional sacrifice. It's meant to be, right? But I think that there's other fasts that could be undertaken in the Karmakanda section of the Vedas, which could to please this god or this goddess or whatever, So it may really, the key is the motive. The key is why you're doing it, you know. And there's no other reason to chant Hare Krishna and dance except to get love of God. No one's doing that and hoping to go to heaven. You know, if you're going to hope to go to heaven, then you find some demigod, you know, whatever. But so the sacrifices, although, you know, going out into the forest and meditating and performing, as it's very clear, the yogis who are after the siddhis, you know, this is another division. Is that what is it? Who is peaceful? So the Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Ata Eva Shanta Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami Sakaliya Shanta. This is one of Lord Chaitanya's teachings to Sanatana Goswami. And he's saying, who's really peaceful? He says the Bhaktas are peaceful. They don't want anything. But the others, the categories, Bhukti Kami, Mukti Kami, and Siddhi Kami. So the Bhukti Kamis are the vast majority of the people. It seems this simply sense gratification. They may perform some more severe austerities. I mean, going to college, you know, and especially today, and going into debt, which can last a lifetime, to get a degree, you know, that's a tremendous sacrifice, and oftentimes you don't really succeed. The jobs aren't there, right? Or it may be there, but the pay isn't what, you know, enough to pay the interest on your debt. You've been cheated. Now what do I do? You know, but you went the sacrifice recommended. Yes, this is what everyone's doing. So that's the problem, is that a sacrifice alone can make you, you know, a better demon. Just look at Hiranyakashipu. I mean, could anyone imagine more tapasya than what he did? Standing on tippy toes, you know, and his whole body got eaten by ants. I don't mind, you know, I'm just going to keep the air flowing in my bones, you know, it's just incredible. But he's a demon. Ultimately, of course, he goes back to being Jai or Vijay. But the sacrifice is always in order to achieve something. You know, people are doing it on the material side, but the sacrifice as outlined and defined in the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam by the sages, that will take us to where we want to be. You know, so that's why knowledge is so important, and that's why the next verse is so important, which I think we'll deal with on Monday. Very importantly, getting a Tattvadarshi to come under the guidance of someone who has seen the truth. All right, the last minute or two. A poem? Okay. All right, this one you haven't heard in a while. It's the easiest meter of any verse I've ever learned. It's just every syllable is the same. Barha pidam maula bimbrad bangshi naran atanvan. Nana kalpa shi sampanno gopa sribi samvita. Netranandam kuvan Krishna tunched mristan viksheta. Save kamak sampadyerat asmakam vidyasina. Decked with crown of peacock plumes and chanting songs with flute you sing. Wearing lovely ornaments while standing in the gopis' ring. Dear most Krishna eyes delight if you will kindly glance our way. All our heart's desires will be fulfilled on this most blessed day. Very easy to memorize. And here's a short one, and then we'll adjourn. Uradi kutamanadi tutabangam, namadadadikidano sadangam, yubadivadaya tutamanatadangam, pranamatayam and tatikitadangam. Even if you don't know the meaning, you can get off on that verse. His flute emanates entrancing sounds for the cowherd girls whose love abounds, for the clever cloud-complexioned lord who's dancing upon the Kalindi shore. What do we need these severe austerities for? Just memorize the verse, chant it, and you'll be happy. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.